The invoice was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock, resting on the granite countertop like a death sentence. My mother-in-law, Doreen, looked at the total, $350, and her face went the color of a bruised plum. 10 minutes earlier, my husband Mitchell had been leaning back in his chair, swirling his wine, convinced that his demand for separate budgets would force me to beg for access to his credit card. He didn't realize that the floor he was standing on, the roof over his head, and the very air conditioning he was sweating in were 80% paid for by me. He wanted a business arrangement? I was about to give him a hostile takeover. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I need to take you back to last Sunday to explain why the air in my kitchen currently feels like the inside of a pressurized airplane cabin. It was the weekly Holloway family lunch, a tradition that Mitchell insisted was vital for family unity, but which I knew was actually a weekly performance review of my domestic skills. I was standing over the kitchen island watching Doreen chew. That was the test. It wasn't about the flavor profile or the presentation. It was about the mechanics of her jaw. I had spent 6 hours prepping a slow-roasted leg of lamb, marinated in rosemary, garlic, and a specific vintage of red wine that cost $40 a bottle. I had timed the oven to the second. I had let the meat rest for exactly 20 minutes to ensure the juices redistributed. Doreen took a bite. She chewed once, twice, then stopped. She picked up her linen napkin, which I had ironed that morning, and dabbed the corner of her mouth. "It is a bold choice, Simone," she said, her voice dropping to that register she used when she wanted to be helpful in the most destructive way possible. Using this cut, I mean. It tends to dry out so terribly if one isn't careful. I looked at the meat on her plate. It was pink. It was glistening. It was scientifically perfect. "Is it dry, Doreen?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "I can fetch you some more reduction sauce." "Oh no, don't trouble yourself." She waved a hand, her bracelets clattering. "I'll manage. I just know Mitchell prefers his meat to melt. Don't you, Mitchie?" I looked at my husband. This was the moment in the script where the partner is supposed to say, "Actually, Mom, it's perfect." Or even, "I like it this way." Mitchell didn't look up. He was sawing through a piece of lamb that was tender enough to cut with a spoon, but he was using his steak knife like he was hacking through a relentless jungle. "It's fine, Mom," Mitchell said, stuffing a forkful into his mouth. "Simone's still learning the oven settings. This house has professional-grade appliances, you know. They can be tricky if you aren't used to that level of power." He said it with his mouth full, effectively blaming me and bragging about the appliances I had selected and paid for, in the same breath. Clifford, my father-in-law, just stared at his potatoes. He was a man who had long ago decided that silence was the only armor against his wife's commentary. "Well," Doreen sighed, taking a sip of water as if to wash down a mouthful of sawdust. "Next week, why don't you let me come over early? I can supervise. It's a shame to waste such expensive ingredients." I felt a heat rise in my neck, a physical prickly sensation that had nothing to do with the oven. I followed the recipe from the Culinary Institute, Doreen. It's exactly 135 degrees internal. "Thermometers can be wrong, dear," she smiled. "Palates never are." Mitchell reached for the wine bottle, poured himself a generous glass, and said, "Let's not make a big deal out of it." "Just take Mom up on the offer, Simone. You could use the pointers." He winked at me. He actually winked, as if we were sharing a joke, as if he hadn't just thrown me to the wolves to save himself a 5-minute conversation. I looked down at my own plate, the appetite I had nursed all morning evaporating instantly. I cut a piece of lamb, put it in my mouth, and swallowed it whole. It tasted like ash. Fast forward to Friday 2 days ago. It was 4 in the afternoon and my kitchen looked like a war zone between a bakery and a tech startup. On the left side of the quartz island, my tablet was propped up on a stack of cookbooks. I was on a video call, muted, thank God, with a client who was demanding I resize a logo for the 5th time. He wanted it to pop more. I was frantically sketching revisions with my stylus, my hand cramping because I had been at it since 6 that morning. On the right side of the island, a pot of boiling water was threatening to foam over. I was blanching asparagus for the light appetizer Doreen preferred. In the oven, a beef Wellington was beginning to brown. Mitchell had texted me at noon saying, "Parents coming for dinner tonight. Make something impressive. Mom's been critical lately, need to smooth things over. No, please. No, is that okay?" Just a command issued via iMessage. My head was pounding. It was that specific sharp throb behind the left eye that signals a migraine is packing its bags and heading your way. I dropped the stylus, ran to the stove, and turned the heat down just as the water hissed over the edge, sizzling on the burner. "Damn it," I whispered. I grabbed a rag and wiped the hot stainless steel, burning my knuckle. I didn't stop to run it under cold water. I didn't have time. I had 45 minutes before they walked through the door. My phone buzzed again. It was Mitchell. "Make sure the house is spotless. Dad mentioned the baseboards looked dusty last time." I stared at the screen. The baseboards. I looked down at the floor. The baseboards were pristine white. I had scrubbed them on Tuesday on my hands and knees. I typed back, "I'm working on a deadline and cooking a 3-course meal. If the baseboards bother you, feel free to grab a rag when you get home." I hovered my thumb over the send button. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew what sending that text would do. It would start a fight. It would make dinner tense. It would give Doreen ammunition. I backspaced. "Okay, see you soon." I sent the lie and hated myself for it. I threw the phone onto the counter and went back to the asparagus. I was making 6 figures as a freelance graphic designer, a fact Mitchell conveniently downplayed as gig work. But in this house, I was apparently just a housekeeper who got lucky. The client on the tablet screen waved his hand. I unmuted. "Simone? Did you hear me? I said I want the blue to be more aggressive." "Aggressive blue," I repeated, staring at the perfectly blanched asparagus. "Got it. I'll have the revision to you by Monday." "I need it by tomorrow morning," he said. "Fine," I said. "Tomorrow morning." I ended the call and let my head drop into my hands. I had exactly 30 minutes to shower, change, set the table, and pretend I wasn't running a small corporation from my kitchen counter, while simultaneously catering a banquet. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock on the dot. Mitchell had arrived 10 minutes earlier, rushed upstairs to change out of his suit, and come back down smelling like expensive cologne and arrogance, looking like he had just stepped out of a magazine. He hadn't lifted a finger to help with the table. I opened the door. Doreen and Clifford stood there. Doreen was wearing a beige cashmere cardigan that probably cost more than my first car. She bypassed my attempted hug and walked straight into the foyer. "Something smells burnt," she said by way of greeting. "It's caramelized onions for the tart, Doreen," I said, forcing a smile that felt like it was going to crack the enamel on my teeth. "Welcome." "Caramelized," she repeated, tasting the word like it was sour milk. "If you say so." She ran a finger along the edge of the entry table. She actually checked for dust. I watched her finger come away clean. She looked disappointed. "Mitchell," she called out, ignoring me completely as Mitchell came down the hall. "The yard is looking a bit dry, honey. You need to make sure the sprinklers are calibrated. Property values in this neighborhood are contingent on curb appeal." "I know, Mom," Mitchell said, kissing her cheek. "I'll handle it. I've been swamped at the office. Big merger coming up." "Of course you have," Doreen cooed, patting his chest. "You work so hard to provide all this." She swept her arm around the living room, the room with the vaulted ceilings and the custom lighting I had installed myself. The room where my grandmother's inheritance had paid for the down payment, the furniture, and the art on the walls. "It's a lot of responsibility for one man," Clifford added, nodding solemnly, "carrying the whole load." I was standing right there. I was wearing an apron over my silk blouse. I had flour on my elbow. "Actually," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice, I just landed a major contract with a tech firm in Seattle. The design work is really taking off." Doreen turned to me slowly, blinking as if a houseplant had just spoken. "That's nice, dear," she said. "But let's not pretend your little computer drawings are the same as Mitchell's career. It's good you have a hobby to keep you busy while he's out in the real world." Mitchell laughed. He let out a short, sharp chuckle. "She likes to feel useful, Mom," Mitchell said. "Let her have her win." I froze. The tray of appetizers in my hands felt suddenly heavy, like lead. Let her have her win. As if my career, which had paid off his student loans last year, was a participation trophy. "Dinner is in 10 minutes, I said, turning my back on them before I dropped the tray. "Please sit." Dinner was an endurance sport. I barely ate. I spent the meal refilling wine glasses, clearing plates, and nodding as Clifford lectured us on the bond market. When they finally left at 9 o'clock, the silence in the house was deafening. I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher. My feet were throbbing. I was scraping beef Wellington off the plates that Doreen had barely touched because the puff pastry was too rich, when Mitchell walked in. He didn't offer to help. He leaned against the doorframe, loosening his tie. He had that look on his face. The look he gets when he thinks he's the smartest person in the room. "Leave the dishes," he said. "We need to talk." I didn't stop scrubbing. "Can it wait? I have a deadline in the morning and this kitchen is a disaster." "No, Simone, it can't wait." There was a coldness in his tone that made me pause. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands on a towel. "Okay," I said. "What is it?" He walked over to the kitchen table and slapped a manila folder down on the wood. It made a sharp thwack sound. "Sit down," he commanded. I sat. He opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It looked like a spreadsheet printed in landscape mode. There were bar graphs. There were red lines. "I've been reviewing our finances," Mitchell said, standing over me like a prosecutor. "And frankly, I'm appalled." Appalled? I squinted at the paper. It was a graph of household expenses. "What are you talking about? We have plenty of savings." "No," he cut me off. "I have plenty of savings." "You are bleeding us dry." He pointed a finger at a red bar on the chart labeled Discretionary Household. "Look at this," he said. "Grocery bills, decor, maintenance. It's out of control. You're treating my salary like an infinite resource. You're living a lifestyle you can't afford, Simone." I stared at him. "Your salary? Mitchell, I pay the mortgage. I pay the utilities. I pay for every stick of furniture in this house." He laughed. A cold, dismissive sound. "You threw in some inheritance money for the down payment. That was a one-time thing. Since then, I'm the one carrying the load. My parents are right. You're playing house while I'm working." He tapped the paper again. "This chart proves it. Your freelance income is sporadic at best. It barely covers your own personal spending. Meanwhile, I'm subsidizing your food, your car insurance, your electricity." I looked closer at the chart. The numbers didn't make sense. The income column for me was listed at a quarter of what I actually made. He had completely omitted my last 3 direct deposits. "This is wrong," I said, pointing at the income line. "Where is the deposit from the agency? That was $12,000 just last month." "That went into the joint savings," he said quickly, waving a hand. "That's for the future. That's not operating capital. I'm talking about day-to-day cash flow. You are a drain, Simone. A liability." He took a breath, puffing out his chest. "So here's the new reality. Starting immediately, we are separating finances. Completely. I'm cutting off your access to the joint account. I will pay for the mortgage because it's my investment. You will pay for your own, whatever this is." He gestured vaguely at me. "Your food, your gas, your clothes. The free ride is over." He stood there, chest out, chin up, waiting. I knew exactly what he expected. He expected me to cry. He expected me to panic. He expected me to say, "But Mitchell, how will we manage? I'm sorry, I'll spend less. Please don't cut me off. He wanted me to be the hysterical little woman, so he could be the benevolent, stern provider who graciously forgave me after a night of begging. I looked at his face. I looked at the smug set of his jaw, and suddenly the migraine vanished. The exhaustion vanished. It was replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like I had inhaled pure oxygen. I realized in that split second that I wasn't looking at my husband. I was looking at a thief who had stolen my credit, my labor, and my self-esteem, and was now trying to steal my reality. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt a smile tug at the corners of my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator realizing the prey has just walked into a trap. "You're right," I said. The air left the room. Mitchell blinked. "What?" I said. "You're absolutely right," I said, my voice smooth and steady. "We should separate the finances. Clarity is important in business, and if you feel like I'm a liability, we need to correct that immediately." I stood up. I didn't look at the fake graph. I looked him dead in the eye. "Excellent idea, Mitchell. Let's start separate budgets effective tonight." He looked confused. He shifted his weight. "Well, good. I'm glad you're being mature about this. It's for your own good, really, to teach you responsibility." "Absolutely," I said. "Responsibility is key." "Right," he said, unsure of what to do with his victory now that I hadn't fought back. "I'm going to bed. I have an early tea time tomorrow. Don't stay up too late with your drawings." He turned and walked out of the kitchen. I watched him go. I waited until I heard his footsteps on the stairs, then the heavy thud of the bedroom door closing. I was alone in the kitchen. The dirty dishes were still piled in the sink. The remains of the beef Wellington were sitting on the counter, getting cold. I didn't touch the dishes. I walked over to the island and picked up my tablet. I sat down on a bar stool, adrenaline humming in my veins like caffeine. I needed to see the real numbers, not his fake graph. I needed to pull the bank statements, the credit card itemizations, the deed to the house. I was going to build a forensic accounting of our marriage that would make his little Excel sheet look like a child's finger painting. I tapped the screen of my tablet. The battery icon flashed red. 1%. "No," I whispered. I scrambled for the charging cable I usually kept plugged into the kitchen island outlet. It wasn't there. The outlet was empty. I remembered then. Mitchell had taken it this morning. "My phone was dying in the car," he had said. "I borrowed your cord." "Borrowed," I muttered. He never returned anything he borrowed. I tapped the screen again. It went black. Dead. Damn it! I slammed the dead tablet onto the counter. I couldn't do this on my phone. The screen was too small for the spreadsheets I needed to build. I needed a charger. Now. I knew there was a box of old electronics in the garage. The cable graveyard. It was my only hope. I marched to the door leading to the garage and yanked it open. The garage was sweltering hot, smelling of gasoline and old fertilizer. Mitchell's golf clubs were sprawled in the middle of the floor, blocking the path to the shelving units. Of course they were. I stepped over the golf bag, my silk blouse clinging to my back in the sudden heat. The only light came from the automatic opener bulb, which flickered like a strobe light in a horror movie. I found the box on the bottom shelf behind a rusty lawnmower. It was labeled Misc Wires, in my handwriting from 3 years ago. I crouched down, ignoring the cobwebs that brushed against my bare arm. I shoved aside a tangle of coaxial cables, a collection of adapters for phones that hadn't existed since 2010, and a knot of Christmas lights. "Come on," I hissed, digging deeper. Dust motes danced in the flickering light, making me sneeze. My fingers brushed against something plastic and white. I pulled it out. A lightning cable. But the casing was frayed near the connector, the shielding peeling back to reveal the silver wires underneath. "Please work," I prayed to the gods of technology. I grabbed it and stood up, knocking my shin against the lawnmower handle. I bit my tongue to keep from screaming. The pain was sharp and real, grounding me. I ran back inside, locking the garage door behind me. I plugged the frayed cable into the kitchen outlet and connected the tablet. For a second, nothing happened. I held my breath. I jiggled the connector. Bing. The charging battery icon appeared on the screen. I let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. I wasn't just charging a tablet. I was powering up the weapon that was going to dismantle my husband's ego, brick by brick. I pulled up a fresh stool, grabbed a bottle of Mitchell's special occasion sparkling water from the fridge, cracked it open, and waited for the device to reboot. The audit was about to begin. The tablet screen flickered to life, casting a bluish glow over the dirty dishes I still hadn't touched. I ignored the sticky residue of beef Wellington sauce on the counter and tapped the banking app icon. Face ID failed. I was frowning too hard, so I punched in the passcode. My heart was doing that fluttery thing it does when you drink too much espresso on an empty stomach. I navigated past the joint checking tab, which Mitchell had flourished in my face earlier, and clicked into the transaction history details. I scrolled back to the date of my last big deposit, $12,400 from the Seattle contract. There it was. Deposit, mobile check. And then, exactly 4 hours later, transfer to savings $12,000. Okay, I whispered. That's what you said, joint savings. I clicked on joint savings. The balance read $2,150. I blinked. That wasn't right. The math didn't math. If he moved my $12,000 in there, plus the $8,000 that was already there last month, I scrolled down the savings history. It was a hemorrhage. Transfer to XT Act ending in 8890, $4,000. Transfer to XT Act ending in 8890, $3,500. Transfer to XT Act ending in 8890, $5,000. All dated within 48 hours of my deposits hitting. What is account 8890? I asked the empty kitchen. I went back to the main menu. I searched for linked accounts. There was nothing ending in 8890 visible on my dashboard. I grabbed Mitchell's budget printout, the one he had slammed on the table. I scanned his fabricated expenses. He had listed mortgage at $4,000 a month. I opened the mortgage portal in a new tab. The monthly payment was $3,200. He was skimming $800 a month off the top of the house payment alone. Then I saw it. A recurring automatic payment set up from the main checking account, labeled obscurely as MHLLC Consult. I copy-pasted MHLLC into the State Business Registry search, Mitchell Holloway Limited Liability Company. Registered agent, Mitchell Holloway. Address, a P.O. box in downtown. He wasn't saving for our future. He was laundering our joint income into a private slush fund. He was charging me a tax to live in my own house, skimming the difference, and then gaslighting me about the grocery bill. I took screenshots, dozens of them. I emailed them to a secure cloud account he didn't know existed. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady as stone. It was now 1 a.m. The adrenaline had curdled into a cold, hard focus. I opened a new spreadsheet. Separate budgets, I murmured. You want market value? Let's find market value. I opened Google. I started searching for service rates in our specific zip code, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city. Search. Private chef Miami residential rates. Result, $75 to $100 per hour plus cost of ingredients, plus 20% sourcing fee. I typed that into the spreadsheet. Search. Live-in housekeeper Saltar maid service luxury home. Result, $45 per hour. I added that. Search. Event planner Hati hostess fee. Result, flat rate of $500 per event. I looked at the list. It was horrifying. I had been donating roughly $3,000 of labor to this marriage every single month, on top of paying 80% of the mortgage. I started building the invoice. Date, Sunday, current. Bill to Mitchell Holloway. Service, Sunday family luncheon, the Holloway tradition. I itemized it. Menu planning, 1 hour. Sourcing, grocery shopping, 2 hours. Prep and cooking, 4 hours. Service and cleanup, 2 hours. Total hours, 9. Rate, 35 OHHR, discounted, family rate. Ingredients, market price. The total came to roughly $350. I looked at the number. It was less than a pair of his golf shoes. It was reasonable. It was undeniable. I saved the file as Invoice01 PDF forward. Then I closed the tablet, plugged it back in, and walked up the stairs. I slipped into bed next to him. He was snoring, a soft, rhythmic whistling. He looked peaceful. He looked like a man who thought he had won. I stared at the ceiling for 3 hours, listening to him breathe, calculating the exact cost of his arrogance. The sun hit the bedroom window at 7 o'clock. Usually, by this time, I was already downstairs. On Saturdays, I made pancakes, blueberry for me, chocolate chip for him, and bacon, crisp, not burnt. The smell of coffee would be drifting up the stairs, acting as his alarm clock. Today, the air smelled like nothing, just filtered AC and dust. I got out of bed, put on my silk robe, and went downstairs. I didn't start the coffee maker. I didn't pull the bacon out of the freezer. Instead, I made myself a single cup of tea using the electric kettle. I grabbed my tablet and walked out to the patio. I sat on the wicker sofa, tucked my legs under me, and started reading a digital thriller. 20 minutes later, I heard the heavy thud of footsteps. Mitchell appeared at the sliding glass door. His hair was messy, sticking up on one side. He was wearing his boxers and a t-shirt that said Golf Life. He blinked at the bright sunlight, then looked at the empty kitchen table behind him. He slid the door open. "Morning," he croaked, rubbing his eyes. "Coffee ready." I didn't look up from my screen. "Good morning. No, I don't think so." He paused. "What do you mean?" "Separate budgets," I said lightly, turning a page on the screen, "and separate labor. I made tea for myself. The coffee beans are in the pantry if you want to grind some." He stared at me. His brain was trying to reboot. "You didn't make coffee?" "Nope." He looked at the kitchen. "Are you making breakfast?" "I'm starving." "I had a yogurt earlier," I lied. "I'm good." "Okay." He scratched his stomach. "Well, throw some pancakes on. I have a tea time at 10. I finally looked up. I gave him a pleasant customer service smile. "That sounds delicious, Mitchell. Let me know how they turn out." He frowned, his brow furrowing. "Simone, don't be petty. Just make the damn pancakes." "I'm not being petty," I said. "I'm being fiscally responsible. I realized that my cooking services were an unallocated subsidy. Since we're correcting the ledger, I'm off the clock." He stared at me for a long 5 seconds. Then he let out a scoff, a noise of pure disbelief. "Fine," he snapped. "I'll eat cereal." He turned and stomped back into the kitchen. I heard the cupboard slam. I heard the rustle of a box. Then silence. "We're out of milk," he yelled from the kitchen. "I know," I called back, returning to my book. "I finished it yesterday. You should add it to your shopping list." He came out onto the patio 5 minutes later, holding a bowl of dry raisin bran. He was chewing aggressively, the crunching sound echoing off the pavers. He sat on the chair opposite me, putting his feet up on the coffee table, right next to my tea. "This is childish," he said, spraying a crumb of bran flake. "You're trying to punish me because I asked for financial transparency." "I'm giving you transparency, Mitchell," I said calmly. "You said I was a luxury employee." "Employees don't work for free." He rolled his eyes. He gestured to my tablet with his spoon. "Is that what you're doing? Working on your little drawings? Trying to scrape together enough for the electric bill?" The insult landed exactly where he wanted it to. Little drawings. He knew I had designed the branding for 3 Fortune 500 subsidiaries last year. He knew my drawings paid for the Audi he drove on weekends. I felt the flash of anger, hot and sharp, but I didn't let it show. I just mentally opened my spreadsheet and added a line item: consultation fee, emotional labor, tolerance of hostile work environment. "Actually," I said, I'm reviewing a contract, but thank you for the concern. Just make sure you have the money for your share of the groceries by tomorrow, he said, standing up. I'm not covering you at the register anymore. Don't worry, I said. I'm going to the store this afternoon. I'll buy my own things. Good, he said. Get some steaks. Dad likes ribeyes. I didn't answer. He waited for a confirmation, didn't get one, and stormed off to shower. The supermarket was crowded. Saturday afternoon chaos. Usually I navigated the aisles with a master list organized by department: produce, deli, meat, dairy. I would fill the cart with the things Mitchell liked: the $20 artisanal beer, the thick-cut bacon, the specific brand of hot sauce he was obsessed with. Today, I grabbed a handbasket. I walked past the meat counter. I looked at the ribeyes. They were $39 a pound. Not today, Satan, I muttered. I walked to the seafood section. I bought a single perfect portion of wild-caught salmon for $12. I went to the produce section. I bought one avocado, a small container of blueberries, and a bag of spinach. I went to the dairy aisle. I bought a 4-pack of Greek yogurt, the lime flavor I loved but Mitchell hated because he said it smelled like cleaning fluid. I walked past the beer. I walked past the chips. I walked past the frozen pizzas he ate when he was too tired to chew real food. My basket was light. It felt strange. For 5 years, I had shopped for geese. I had shopped for him. I realized I didn't even know what I liked to eat anymore, besides the few things he didn't complain about. I added a bottle of Pinot Grigio, the good stuff, $45. I looked at my basket. It was a portrait of a single woman. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. I made my way to the checkout. The line was long. Behind me, a woman with 3 screaming toddlers was ramming her cart into my heels every time the line inched forward. Sorry, she mumbled, not looking sorry at all. I reached the belt and unloaded my small haul. The cashier, a teenager with purple hair and a nose ring, scanned the items with robotic indifference. "That'll be $84.50, she said. I inserted my debit card, my personal one, not the joint card Mitchell had threatened to cut off. Beep. "Card read error," the girl said. "Try it again." I wiped the chip on my shirt and inserted it again. Beep. "Declined," she said, louder this time. The woman behind me sighed, a loud, heavy exhalation of impatience. "It shouldn't be declined," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "I have plenty of funds." "Machine says do not honor," the girl said, popping her gum. "You got another card?" My stomach dropped. Had Mitchell somehow accessed my personal account? Had he frozen my assets? "1 second," I said. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. A notification popped up. Fraud alert. Unusual activity detected. Transaction pattern does not match history. It was because the amount was so small. Usually, my grocery transactions were $300 or more. The bank's algorithm thought a thief was testing the card with small purchases. "It's a fraud freeze," I said, typing furiously to verify the transaction. "I just need to clear it." "Miss, people are waiting," the woman behind me snapped. "Can you move aside?" "I'm trying," I said, my voice tight. The app was buffering. The little circle spun and spun. Come on. "I can suspend the transaction," the cashier offered, her hand hovering over a button. "No," I said. "It's there." The green checkmark appeared. Transaction verified. "Try it now," I said. I inserted the card. I held my breath. The woman behind me was now actively pushing her cart into my calves. Ding. Approved. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I grabbed the receipt. I grabbed my bag. "Have a nice day," the cashier deadpanned. I walked out to the parking lot, my hands shaking slightly. It was a small glitch, a stupid algorithm, but it felt like a warning. The system wasn't built for me to be independent. It was suspicious of it. Well, the system was about to get a shock. I walked into the kitchen at 4 o'clock. Mitchell was sitting at the island scrolling through his phone. He looked up when he heard the crinkle of the paper bag. Singular. "Finally," he said, not moving to help. "Did you get the thick cut? The butcher at Whole Foods tries to pawn off the thin ones if you don't watch him." I set the bag down on the counter. It made a light, pathetic thump. "I didn't go to Whole Foods," I said. "I went to the regular market." Mitchell frowned. He stood up and walked over, peering into the bag like a customs officer inspecting contraband. He saw the Greek yogurt. He saw the spinach. He saw the single vacuum-sealed fillet of salmon. He pulled the bag open wider. "Where are the steaks?" "I didn't buy them," I said, taking the Pinot Grigio out and setting it beside the fridge. "You didn't—" "What?" He laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "Dad is coming tomorrow. We always do steaks on Saturday and the roast on Sunday. That's the routine." "It's your routine, Mitchell," I said, opening the fridge. "And since we have separate budgets and you didn't transfer any funds for the Holloway family meat budget, I bought what I could afford for myself." I placed the yogurt on the middle shelf. "You're joking," he said. His face was starting to turn a blotchy pink. "You're seriously going to make me go to the store now? It's Saturday afternoon. It'll be a zoo." "I'm not making you do anything," I said, closing the fridge door with a soft thud. "I'm simply declining to act as your personal shopper. You have a car. You have a wallet. You have free will." He stared at the closed fridge. "This is insane." "You're blowing this out of proportion." "I'm balancing the books," I corrected him. "You wanted efficiency. This is what efficiency looks like." I didn't stop there. I walked over to the junk drawer, the one I had raided for the cable earlier, and dug out my label maker. It was a bulky handheld device I used for organizing my client files. I typed in a name, Simone, click. The little plastic strip spit out. I peeled the backing off and stuck it firmly onto the lid of my yogurt. Mitchell watched me, his mouth slightly open. "What are you doing?" "Inventory management," I said. I typed again. Click. I stuck the second label on the neck of the $45 Pinot Grigio. "You're acting like a college roommate," he sneered. "Are you going to draw a line down the middle of the room next?" "No," I said, smoothing the label down with my thumb, "because I own 80% of the room. If we drew lines based on equity, you'd be standing on a single tile in the corner by the trash can." He flinched. It was a small movement, a tightening of the muscles around his eyes, but I saw it. I had never thrown the inheritance in his face before. I had always been so careful to protect his fragile ego, to make him feel like the man of the house. Now I didn't care. "Don't start that," he warned, his voice low. "Don't bring your grandmother's money into this. That's ancient history." "It's equity, Mitchell," I said, "and equity never expires." I placed my labeled wine in the door of the fridge, right next to his six-pack of domestic beer. The visual contrast was poetic. 2 hours later, the doorbell rang. Mitchell was in the living room, aggressively watching a golf tournament at maximum volume. He looked up, expecting his parents, even though it was Saturday. "Who is that?" he demanded. "Dinner," I said. I opened the door. The delivery driver handed me a heavy brown paper bag that smelled of truffle oil and seared scallops. I had ordered from The Palm, one of the most expensive steakhouses in the city. I ordered the filet mignon sliders, the truffle fries, and a lobster bisque. Total cost, $92. I carried the bag into the kitchen. Mitchell followed me, sniffing the air like a bloodhound. "Did you order food?" he asked, hope flickering in his eyes. "I'm starving. I didn't go to the store." "I ordered food," I said, unpacking the containers on the kitchen island. "For me." I grabbed a fork and a linen napkin. I popped the lid off the bisque. Steam curled up, rich and savory. "You're kidding," he said. "You ordered steak and didn't get me anything?" "Separate budgets," I reminded him, dipping a spoon into the soup. "I assumed you'd want to manage your own nutritional intake." I took a bite. It was divine. Mitchell stood there for a long moment, watching me eat. His stomach actually growled, a loud, audible gurgle that cut through the silence. "Fine," he spat. He marched to the pantry. I heard him rummaging around. He came back with a loaf of white bread that was 3 days past its prime and a jar of peanut butter. He sat at the other end of the island as far away from me as possible. He spread the peanut butter on the dry bread with aggressive, stabbing motions. The bread tore. He cursed under his breath. We ate in silence, me savoring lobster bisque, him choking down a dry peanut butter sandwich. The only sound was the clinking of my spoon and the angry chewing from his side of the island. It was the most satisfying meal of my life. Sunday mornings in the Holloway house usually sounded like a commercial kitchen. By 8 o'clock, the stand mixer would be whirring, the oven fan would be roaring, and the rhythmic chop, chop, chop of a knife against a board would be the background noise to Mitchell's sleep. This Sunday, at 9 o'clock, the house was silent. I was sitting on the patio again, this time with a full pot of French press coffee, made only enough for 1 cup, and my tablet. The birds were singing. A light breeze rustled the palm fronds. Inside, the house was still. No smell of roasting garlic, no scent of searing meat, no aroma of baking bread. It felt vacuous, like a stage set before the actors arrive. I checked the time. 9:15. The parents arrived at 1. A leg of lamb took 4 hours to roast properly, plus prep time. If the oven wasn't on by now, lunch wasn't happening. I took a sip of coffee. I waited. At 9:30, Mitchell stumbled into the kitchen. He was wearing his Sunday best polo shirt, already dressed for the performance. He looked around the pristine, empty kitchen. He looked at the cold oven. He looked at the empty counters. Panic, sheer and unadulterated, washed over his face. He saw me through the glass door and slid it open so hard it bounced off the track. "Simone!" he yelled. "What are you doing? Why isn't the oven on?" I lowered my tablet slowly. "Good morning to you too, Mitchell." "Don't give me that," he snapped, pointing at the stove. "My parents are going to be here in 3 hours. You haven't even started prep. The lamb takes hours." "There is no lamb," I said calmly. "I didn't buy a lamb. Remember? I bought salmon. For myself." He froze. His face went pale. You didn't buy the roast?" "No," I said, "and I'm not cooking it." "Are you insane?" His voice rose to a screech. "Mom is coming. This is Sunday lunch. You can't just cancel it." "I didn't cancel it," I said. "I just didn't volunteer to cater it for free." I tapped my tablet screen. "However, since you seem distressed, I am willing to offer my services as a freelance caterer. I can rush order ingredients via Instacart and have a meal ready by 2 o'clock. But it will require a rush fee." I held up the tablet. I had the invoice queued up. "Labor, sourcing, and overtime comes to $350, I said. "Payable in advance via Venmo." He stared at me like I was speaking a dead language. "You want me to pay you to cook for my family? In my own house?" "In our house," I corrected. "And yes, if you want a service, you pay the vendor. That's how budgets work, right?" "I'm not paying you a dime," he hissed. "You're my wife, not a contractor. Get in there and fix this." "No," I said. I went back to my reading. He stood there for a full minute, his chest heaving. He looked at the kitchen, then at me, then at his watch. He realized with dawning horror that he couldn't cook, he couldn't prep, and he certainly couldn't produce a roast leg of lamb out of thin air. He turned and ran into the living room. I paused my reading. I leaned my head slightly toward the door. The acoustics in the house were excellent, another feature I had paid for. "Mom," I heard him say. His voice was high, tight, and fake cheerful. "Hey, yeah, everything is great. Listen, about lunch." I held my breath. Was he going to admit it? Was he going to say, "Simone is on strike because I was a jerk"? No, don't eat beforehand." He laughed, a nervous, jagged sound. "Actually, I wanted to surprise you guys. Yeah, we're doing something different today. A surprise menu, totally different from the usual. I smiled. He had just dug his own grave. Yeah, just come at 1. It'll be ready. Okay, love you too. He hung up. I heard him exhale, a long, shaky breath. He walked back to the patio door. He looked at me through the glass. His eyes were desperate, pleading, and furious all at once. He mouthed the words, "Fix this." I just lifted my coffee cup and a mock toast and took a sip. At 11:30, Mitchell's panic shifted from paralysis to frantic, uncoordinated action. He decided that since he couldn't produce a roast lamb, he would pivot to brunch. Brunch is trendy, he muttered to himself, pulling a carton of eggs out of the fridge. Everyone likes omelets. I watched from the safety of the living room sofa, where I had moved to enjoy the air conditioning. It was like watching a gorilla try to defuse a bomb. He reached for the non-stick skillet, the one I kept in the drawer to the right of the stove. He yanked the drawer open. It was empty. "Where is the pan?" he yelled. "Simone, where did you put the pan?" "I reorganized the kitchen on Friday," I said, not looking up from my magazine. "Remember? You said the clutter was stressing you out. It's in the lower cabinet by the dishwasher now." He groaned and kicked the cabinet door open. He grabbed the pan, slamming it onto the burner. He turned the heat to high, the power boil setting. He cracked an egg. A piece of shell fell into the bowl. He fished for it with his finger, missed, and smashed the yolk. "Damn it!" he hissed. He threw a stick of butter into the scorching hot pan. It didn't melt. It screamed. Brown smoke instantly billowed up, smelling of burnt dairy. Too hot. Why is this stove so hot? He grabbed the handle to move the pan, forgetting that the gas flame had been licking up the side of the metal for 2 minutes. "Ah, son of a—" He dropped the pan. It clattered against the granite, splashing hot blackened butter onto the pristine white subway tile backsplash I had installed last year. He stood there, clutching his burned hand, staring at the grease stain on the wall. He checked his phone. It was 12:15. He opened a food delivery app. I saw him furiously tapping. Then I saw his shoulders slump. 90 minutes? He whispered. Who waits 90 minutes for pizza? He was out of time. He was out of options, and the butter smoke was starting to drift toward the smoke detector. At exactly 12:59, the doorbell rang. The sound was sharp, electric, and final. It cut through the tension in the house like a cleaver. Mitchell was standing in the middle of the kitchen. He had run his hand under cold water, but he hadn't cleaned the butter splash. He was sweating, visible dark semicircles under the arms of his polo shirt. His hair was disheveled from running his hands through it a dozen times. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, white-rimmed with terror. "Simone," he said. His voice was a rasp. "Please, just put some crackers out. Something. Don't let them see it like this." I stood up. I smoothed the front of my linen dress. I picked up my tablet. "You should probably get the door, Mitchell," I said. "It's rude to keep guests waiting." I walked past him, stepping carefully over a splatter of grease on the floor, and headed for the patio door. I wasn't going to be part of the welcoming committee. I was the audience. The doorbell rang again, longer this time, impatient. Mitchell wiped his sweaty palms on his pants, took a deep breath that sounded like a death rattle, and walked toward the front door. I positioned myself on the patio, just out of direct sight but close enough to hear every syllable through the screen door. "Mom, Dad," Mitchell's voice pitched up an octave. "Hey, you're right on time." "We're always on time, Mitchell," Doreen said. I heard the rustle of shopping bags. "We brought that wine you like, the cab." "Great," Mitchell said. "That's great. Come in." There was a pause, the silence of 3 people standing in an entryway. "It smells odd in here," Doreen said. She sniffed loudly, 3 sharp intakes of breath. "Is that burnt popcorn?" "No," Mitchell said quickly. "It's clarified butter. I was experimenting. with a reduction. A reduction? Clifford asked. I thought we were having lamb. Lamb doesn't need a butter reduction. It's a new technique, Mitchell lied. He was digging so fast he was going to hit magma. It's a deconstructed concept, very modern. Why don't you guys sit in the living room? I'll get you some drinks. I don't want to sit, Doreen said. Her voice was moving closer. I want to see this concept. You know I don't like experimental food, Mitchell. I hope you have a backup. Mom, really, just relax. Nonsense. I need to wash my hands anyway. I heard the click of her heels on the hardwood. She was bypassing the living room. She was heading straight for the kill zone. Doreen marched into the kitchen. I leaned forward in my chair, watching through the glass. She stopped dead in the center of the room. She looked at the stove. The burner was off. The pan was in the sink. The grease stain was still on the wall. She looked at the island. It was empty. No cutting boards. No platters. No serving spoons. Just cold, hard quartz. She looked at the oven. The display was dark. No heat. No light. Mitchell, she said slowly, the oven is cold. It's resting, Mitchell squeaked from the hallway. The meat is resting. Doreen narrowed her eyes. She walked to the refrigerator. I need some water, she muttered. This heat is stifling. She pulled the fridge door open. The light illuminated the interior. It was stark. Without the usual Sunday abundance, the trays of prepped vegetables, the marinating meats, the bowls of salad, the fridge looked cavernous. There, on the middle shelf, sat my 4-pack of lime yogurt. The label maker tape was bright white against the foil lid. Property of Simone. Next to it, the bottle of Pinot Grigio. Property of Simone. Doreen stared at the labels. She leaned in, squinting, as if she couldn't process the words. She picked up the yogurt container. She held it up to the light. Property of Simone? She read aloud. She looked at the empty shelf where the roast should have been. She looked back at the yogurt. The math finally clicked in her head. It wasn't a scream exactly. It was a noise of pure, indignant fury, a guttural ha that sounded like she had been physically shoved. Mitchell, she bellowed. Mitchell ran into the kitchen, nearly tripping over his own feet. Clifford followed, looking bewildered and clutching his car keys. What is this? Doreen shook the yogurt container at him like a grenade. Why is there a label on the yogurt? And where is my lunch? She spun around, scanning the room frantically. There is no food, she declared. There is nothing cooking. You lied to me. Mitchell held up his hands. Mom, listen. It's a funny story. It is not funny, she shrieked. We drove 40 minutes. I am diabetic, Mitchell. I need to eat at 1 o'clock. Where is the food? She turned to Clifford. He has no food. He lied. Clifford looked at the empty counters. He looked at the grease stain. He looked at his son. Son, Clifford said, his voice low and dangerous. What is going on? Mitchell looked trapped. He looked at the patio door. He looked at me. It's Simone, he blurted out. She refused to cook. She's having an episode. That was my cue. I stood up. I slid the glass door open. The sound of the rolling track was smooth and heavy. I'm not having an episode, Mitchell, I said, stepping into the cool air of the kitchen. I'm having a contract dispute. The room went silent. All three of them turned to look at me. I was wearing my favorite linen dress. I was holding my tablet. I looked calm. I looked professional. I looked nothing like the flustered, apologetic daughter-in-law they were used to bullying. Simone, Doreen snapped, what is the meaning of this? Why is there a label on the yogurt? Because I paid for it, I said. I walked over to the island. I placed the tablet down on the quartz, screen facing up. I tapped the screen to wake it. The PDF was bright and clear. Invoice 1. Bill to Mitchell Holloway. Services Sunday Luncheon Catering. As Mitchell mentioned on Friday, I said, addressing Clifford directly because I knew he was the only one who would understand the language. We have moved to a strict separation of finances. Mitchell felt he was subsidizing my lifestyle. I swiped the screen to scroll down to the itemized list. Since the Sunday lunch requires approximately 9 hours of labor and $200 in materials, and since those funds were not allocated from Mitchell's budget, the service was suspended. Service? Doreen sputtered. I am your mother-in-law. Cooking for family is not a service. It is a duty. Not when I'm an employee, I said coldly. Employees get paid. Wives get partnership. Mitchell decided I was the former. I pointed to the total at the bottom of the screen. Total due, $350. However, I said, I am a professional. If you want lunch, I can have a catered meal from the Italian oven delivered here in 45 minutes, plus a service fee for the rush coordination. I looked at Mitchell. He was pale, leaning against the counter for support. The total is $350, I said. Payable now, or you can eat the burnt butter. Doreen looked from the invoice to me, her mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. $350? She sputtered. For lunch? That is extortion. It is market rate, I said, tapping the screen to highlight the breakdown. Actually, it is a bargain. I didn't charge you for the hostess hazard pay, which covers the passive-aggressive comments about my career. That is usually a 20% surcharge. Mitchell peeled himself off the counter. The blood had rushed back into his face, turning it a deep, ugly crimson. Stop it, he growled. Just stop it. You're embarrassing us. You're acting like a lunatic. Am I? I swiped to the next tab on the spreadsheet, the one I had built the night before showing the market value of a live-in housekeeper versus my contribution. You asked for a business arrangement, Mitchell. You said my comfortable life was at your expense. I am simply auditing that claim. I pointed to the net loss column. According to my calculations, by cooking, cleaning, and managing this household for free, I have subsidized your lifestyle to the tune of $45,000 a year. And that does not include the equity. Equity? Clifford perked up. He stepped forward, pushing his glasses up his nose. What equity? The down payment, Clifford, I said. Mitchell likes to forget that part. That was the trigger. Mitchell lunged forward, placing himself between me and his father. He looked like a cornered animal. That is enough, he shouted. I want you out, right now. Pack a bag and get out of my house. He pointed a shaking finger at the front door. You want to play games? Fine, but you do it somewhere else. I am the owner of this property, and I am evicting you. Doreen nodded vigorously, her earrings jangling. Yes, get her out, Mitchell. She is clearly unstable. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at Mitchell with a pity that must have burned worse than his hate. Correct me if I am wrong, Mitchell, I said, my voice dangerously soft, but you can't evict the majority shareholder. I tapped the tablet again. I opened the file labeled Deed and Title BFB. I pinched the screen to zoom in on the financial addendum. 80%, I said, turning the screen so Clifford could see it clearly over Mitchell's shoulder. That is the percentage of the down payment that came from the trust fund my grandmother left me. $160,000. Clifford leaned in. He squinted at the document. Mitchell put in $40,000, I continued. And since then, I have paid the property taxes and the insurance premiums from my little drawing money. That's a lie, Mitchell screamed. He tried to grab the tablet, but I pulled it back. That money was a gift. She gave it to us. It was a wedding gift. He turned to his father, his eyes wild. Dad, don't listen to her. She's manipulating the files. She's good with Photoshop. That money was a loan from her grandmother to the marriage. I paid it back. You paid it back? I raised an eyebrow. Really? Because I have the bank records right here. I swiped to the next screenshot, the one showing the transfers to MH LLC. Is that how you paid it back? I asked. By skimming $800 a month from the mortgage payments into a secret shell company? The silence that followed was absolute. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to roar. Clifford froze. He looked at the screen. He saw the transfers. Transfer to MH LLC $800. Transfer to MH LLC $800. Mitchell, Clifford said. His voice was no longer dangerous. It was hollow. What is MH LLC? Mitchell opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the floor. He looked at the ceiling. He looked anywhere but at his father. It's a consulting firm, Mitchell stammered. For tax purposes, I was going to surprise you, Simone, with a vacation fund. A vacation fund? I asked. Registered to a P.O. box in your name? While you tell me we can't afford groceries? Clifford reached out and took the tablet from my hand. He didn't ask. He just took it. He scrolled through the bank statements. He scrolled through the MH LLC registry info I had saved. He looked at the invoice for the Sunday lunch. He was a man of numbers. He didn't care about feelings. He cared about the ledger, and the ledger was screaming that his son was a fraud. He handed the tablet back to me. He looked at Mitchell. The disappointment in his eyes was heavier than any anger. You embezzled from your own marriage, Clifford said. It was a statement of fact. Dad, no, it's... You lied about the house, Clifford continued. You lied about the lunch. You lied about the money. He turned to Doreen, who was still clutching the yogurt like a talisman. Put the yogurt down, Doreen, he said. But she labeled it, Doreen whined. She's being difficult. She's being smart, Clifford said. Mitchell tried to defraud a partner who holds 80% of the voting stock. That's not a marriage, Doreen. That's a bad investment. I took the tablet back. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. The war was over. I had dropped the bomb, and the dust was settling exactly where I wanted it. I think we're done here, I said. I opened my phone app. I dialed a number I had saved earlier. I put it on speaker. Ring, ring. Thank you for calling. The Palm. This is Sarah. Hi, Sarah, I said, my voice bright and professional. I'd like to confirm a reservation for 3 people, under the name Holloway. Yes, for right now. I looked at the 3 of them. I booked you a table, I said. It's on me. Consider it a severance package. We are not going to a restaurant, Doreen shrieked. We are staying right here until this is sorted out. No, Clifford said. We are leaving. He grabbed Doreen's arm, not gently. But Clifford. Mitchell, Clifford said, not looking at his son. You should probably find a hotel. If Simone calls the police for trespassing, she has the deed to prove she can. Mitchell looked at me. He looked small. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a terrified realization that his comfortable life, the life he thought he provided, was actually a rental, and the lease was up. Simone, he whispered, please. I just smiled, a real smile this time. Enjoy the lunch, I said. I hear the lamb is excellent. Clifford dragged a protesting Doreen out the front door. She was still shouting about disrespect as she was shoved into the Cadillac. Mitchell lingered in the doorway. He looked at the living room, at the custom lighting, at the life he had lost because he wanted to save $300 on groceries. I'll fix this, he said, his voice cracking. I'll transfer the money back. We can talk. The invoice is past due, Mitchell, I said. I stepped forward and closed the heavy oak door in his face. Click. I threw the deadbolt. I walked back into the kitchen. I picked up the yogurt. I picked up the wine. I walked to the patio, sat down, and listened to the sound of their cars driving away. It was the most beautiful silence I had ever heard. I am writing this from a loft in the Arts District. It has exposed brick walls, huge industrial windows, and absolutely no white quartz countertops. The divorce was finalized last week. It was surprisingly fast. When your lawyer presents evidence of financial infidelity and hidden assets, Thank you, MH The other party tends to settle quickly to avoid a public trial. We sold the house. Since the market was hot, we made a profit. I took my initial 80% deposit back, plus 80% of the appreciation. Mitchell got his 20%, most of which went to paying off his legal fees and the credit card debt he had been hiding from me. I heard through a mutual friend that he is living in a luxury apartment complex near the airport, the kind with thin walls and a communal pool that's always crowded. Doreen apparently refuses to visit him because the guest parking is too far from the entrance. As for me, I rebranded my design business. My new slogan is Equity and Design. I have a waiting list of clients, and on Sundays, I don't cook. I go to a local jazz brunch with friends. I order the most expensive thing on the menu, and when the check comes, I pay it with my own card, and I never, ever check the price of the lamb. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.